Hello, everybody. I'm back, and welcome to Thursday night's MwM Show. Uh, I have to apologize for this thumbnail image. If you saw it, I don't know how it comes out live. If you saw it, there we go. Just checking to make sure we're on the internet. We are. Ooh, I stopped it right when I was scratching my nose. This one and the one before it about induction heat. The only thing you see is the word heat. Can I blame AI? Can I blame Gemini for these images? I can and I will. But it's my fault that I put them up there and didn't double check the sizing. Even though I did resize them to what YouTube requests. Pixel size is, what is that? 1280 by 720 pixels? Yeah, 1280 by 720 pixels. And that's what it says the size for a thumbnail should be. And I open them, I edit them in Microsoft Image Editor, whatever. And I specifically say, forget the aspect ratio, height and width. Make it this size. Save it as a JPEG. And it does that, and I put them up, and it still doesn't work. Hey, Roberto, what's up, man? So anyway, I'm going to have to correct those. I tried to correct the other one. I tried to correct this one. But if you make it that aspect ratio, it cuts off the bottom of Florida and Texas, so it doesn't really give you an idea of what the United States looked like. But anyway, let's get on with the show and talk about when Western Tennessee was oceanfront property. Now, I hoped to have the thumbnail depict that, and you might be able to see it, and you probably can, but you can't see the text. So, through research, trying to figure out a topic for tonight's show, I discovered that, and some of you may know this already, I'm a little behind the curveball, that during a certain period in the Earth's development or timeline, whatever you want to say, there wasn't any polar ice caps. Now, this is how my research got started. I'd heard about this, and as of course, I was just thinking, is that correct? Do they have proof of that? So, in Gemini's defense, I asked them, was there any fossil evidence that Antarctica, is what I asked it, because I think that's what I'd heard, was at one point a lush green forest? And it said, well, yeah, hello. They've found fossils, plant, fossils, all kinds of stuff. And then I thought, well, okay. So if Antarctica was green and lush, what would the middle of Tennessee or middle of the United States be like? And then that's when it said, well, there used to be a Western Interior Seaway, right pretty much down, not the middle, but pretty daggone close. And when I looked at that, and I double checked it on the internet, it showed that Western Tennessee was partially covered with this seaway. They called it a seaway because I guess, you could get from the top of the world to the bottom of the world in a way. Anywho, so that's what started me on this journey, and I noticed, like I said, I was going to see if we could pinpoint where maybe Memphis was. Was it underwater? I didn't get that far. I started arguing with Gemini about this thumbnail thing, and oh my gosh. Why do I continue to use that? Because when it works pretty daggone good. And when it works halfway, it's still pretty decent. So This was below halfway on the, the scale of, was it good or bad? This image. One that I think it was Gemini that created the one. If you go to my odds and ends playlist, or if you just look at the home page and it shows like the latest videos, my Viking pudding video that I made, it's actually called Pudding Pops. That's what I made. Go check that out. That thumbnail's pretty good. But anyway, back to tonight's show. So there wasn't any ice caps. And you may think, well, dude, when was this? Well, how come I haven't heard about it? Well, if you have heard about it, then you know. Fast forward. If you're watching this on video, if you're watching live, just hang in there. I might get to it. Well, according to what I can find, and let's just double check my figures if I can get back up here. All through that junk, all through that junk. All through that junk. Okay. Here's what Gemini said, and it's probably a little better on internet research than it is on generating these images. What can you expect? When you go to ask Gemini to generate an image, it opens Nana Banana or Banana Nana. I think it's Nana Banana. Don't try to be cute, Google. Just get your junk right. Just call it Google's AI image generating tool. Anyway, so it says because Antarctic, and I'm going to use that term because that's what I asked it, and that's what it references, was green for millions of years, spanning the age of dinosaurs to the rise of mammals. Okay? The climate in North America was varied. However, during the peak hothouse Earth period, when Antarctica was a lush rainforest, North America was unrecognizable. That was mid-Cretaceous period, which was 90 million years ago or so, give or take. 90 million years ago. 90 million. During this time, Antarctica had rainforests similar to New Zealand, and global temperatures were soaring. A split continent, North America was physically cut in half by a massive body of water called the Western Interior Seaway. The shallow ocean stretched from Antarctic Ocean down to the Gulf of Mexico, covering modern-day states like Kansas, Nebraska, Dakotas, and Texas. The climate was humid and subtropical everywhere. No ice. There was no polar caps. The coastlines, because of sea level was so high, coast cities like New York City, Miami, and Los Angeles would have been underwater, of course. So the early Eocene period, which was 50 million years ago, was the warmest period after the dinosaurs went extinct. Antarctica was still ice-free and covered in beech forests. There was palm trees in Alaska, and this is the most famous metric of the Eocene. Fossil evidence shows that palm trees grew as far north as Alaska. The average annual temperature in Alaska was roughly 52 degrees Fahrenheit, preventing hard freezes. There were actually alligators in Antarctica. On Ellesmere Island, which is now a frozen tundra in the high Canadian Arctic, scientists have found fossils of tortoises and alligators. These animals are cold-blooded and cannot survive in freezing temperatures, proving the Arctic never froze even in winter. And that caused me pause because we have tortoises in East Tennessee, and it gets down into the teens, and sometimes single digits. Not for months at a time. Maybe that makes a difference. Do tortoises die off every year? No, they can't. They're more than a year old. What am I thinking? Box turtle, tortoises. Of course, snapping turtles don't count because I think they just hold their breath and sink to the bottom of the pond. But I don't understand that phrase or that statement. The animals are cold-blooded and cannot survive in freezing temperatures. I don't know about alligators, but maybe I'm thinking of something totally different between turtles and tortoises. Maybe one day we'll talk about that. I could be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. There was jungle everywhere. The Pacific Northwest, Washington and Oregon, was a subtropical rainforest similar to what you see in Costa Rica today. Which, what I was thinking was, okay, so if it was warm in the north, I was kind of thinking that, the mid-United States or whatever would be almost deserty, because it was warm up here, and as you come down, maybe it got hotter and hotter, and there wouldn't be anything much growing. I was wrong. All right, mark that down. This is one of the times. All right, so it gives a little breakdown. Then versus now. Now, this is where they're talking about 50 million years ago, not 90. There's 50 million years ago. The Midwest was ocean and coastline, largely underwater due to the interior seaway teeming with marine reptiles like Monosaurus. Alaska was a temperate rainforest, similar to modern Seattle or Oregon, mild winters, no sea ice, and no ice still. New York, East Coast, subtropical. Warmer than today, likely similar to modern Georgia or Florida, with higher sea levels encroaching on land. The South was tropical, intensely hot and humid, supporting dense rainforests and mangroves. All right. That's pretty interesting. So, why was this? You may ask yourself, and that would be a good question. And you probably know the answer. The primary driver was carbon dioxide, CO2. During these green periods, atmospheric CO2 levels were 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million or higher. Well, have you ever seen those bumper stickers or window stickers, whatever you want to call them, that says "Make America Green Again"? No, you wouldn't really want that, because to make America green again, there might be a stupid ocean running right down the middle of it. Remember this: 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And it goes on. It says, for comparison, pre-industrial levels, before the Industrial Revolution, in the 1900s, 280 parts per million is what the CO2 level was. Today, we are around 420 parts per million. Back then, the thick greenhouse atmosphere trapped heat, preventing the poles from freezing even during the long, dark polar winters. Now, they call it, polar winters even back then because, I'm sure, like today, it's, long periods of semi-dark and then long periods of semi-light, which apparently are two different things. Either the sun doesn't set or the sun doesn't totally rise, because we're talking about the Earth's axis, and it's rotating in the distance from the sun and pointing this way and not pointing that way. But that wintertime in Alaska was only like 52 degrees. So very mild, no freezes. I mean, 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million, and today, supposedly, according to this, we're at 420 parts per million. Blows my mind. It really does, because of things the way they are today, and we're talking about, all the greenhouse effects and CO2 levels and those kind of things. If we went below, okay, let's just say pre-industrial levels were 280 parts per million of CO2. That's pre-industrial age. Okay? Was it colder back then? I don't know. Probably felt colder because there wasn't any kind of, really good heat, like electric heat, or propane heat, or natural gas, or any of those kind of things to really keep, or no insulation. So, what would happen if we went below 280 parts per billion? As far, and I guess these are averages, you know what I mean? It has to be averages. And I guess scientists have somehow tested the soil, dug up plants, something that says, oh yeah, this indicates that the CO2 levels were 1,000, 2,000 parts per million. Or maybe they just extrapolated that answer by thinking, well, what would cause there to be no ice caps? Well, warm. What makes warm? Well, my hypothesis would be high CO2 levels trapping the heat in. Well, what would it take? Well, it might take 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million. Sounds good. Let's write that down. I don't know. I don't know how they come up with that. I don't know, because, there wasn't anybody measuring that stuff back in the day. So Robert says Earth has cycles, heats up, cools down. We don't know why. Educated guesses. Poles shifts, solar flares, comet asteroid impacts, continental drift, otherworldly interventions. Now, excuse me. It didn't talk about otherworldly interventions, but it did talk about continental drift. Where was that? Let's go back up here. And I'm not showing you these things because I normally do, and I can, because earlier I was really scrolling through those stupid images. Okay, here we go. Let's just go ahead and do that. Do this. Nope. Yep. Okay. Whatever. Oh, Megalodon. My word. Here we go. All right. So let's see if we can shift that over for you. There we go. Now, Robert, let me know if this red lettering is hard for you to see. And I use you loosely because it looks good to me. But as a viewing the video or viewing the stream, does it look okay? I alluded to a couple of shows back that I tried to do some things with my computer to improve it and just about lost it forever. Not too bad. Oh, that's good. Anyway, it changed some things, and so I had to go back into my settings, and this is I set it to the dark Windows display instead of the typical. As I get older, I notice that glare makes it harder for me to read. As I drive, I like to turn the dash lights down because it just seems like maybe it's, I'm developing cataracts or whatever that is, that when I drive at night, the dash lights shine up, seem like they're shining up in my face a lot. And if I turn down the dash lights a little more, I find it easier to see, not be distracted by all this light coming up at me. Anyway, I picked the dark mode, changed some things around, and ended up with red text because it shows up pretty good against the black. Anyway, I asked Gemini, is there proof that the Antarctic was once green vegetation? It says yes, there are overwhelming scientific proof that Antarctic was once lush green and teeming with vegetation. So you have in 2017 discoveries, the 2017 discovery, researchers drilling into the seafloor of western Antarctica found sediment cores dating back 90 million years ago. Inside, they found pristinely preserved fossil forest soil, pollen, and spores. The preservation was so good that they could identify individual cell structures of plants. And what did it prove? It proved that this area was once a temperate rainforest similar to those in New Zealand or Italy today, with average temperatures around 54 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty cool. There's massive coal deposits. And the science is coal is effectively fossilized plant matter. It forms when giant swamps and forests die, sink into the muck, and are compressed over millions of years. Antarctica holds some of the largest coal reserves in the world, specifically in the Transantarctic Mountains. Interesting. They found dinosaur fossils, which dinosaurs were not, and I believe they were all cold-blooded. Most of them were cold-blooded. They wouldn't be up there where the ice was like the tortoises and alligators. Remember that. When was it green? Antarctica wasn't always frozen. It cycled through different climates, largely dictated by the movements of tectonic plates and CO2 levels. So there you go, Robert. That was kind of a roundabout way of me getting into the fact that continental drift, the shifting of tectonic plates, probably the same thing along the same lines. You were right on spot. Yeah, the Sahara was fertile, lush jungle at one point. Right. Which, I mean, but how long ago was that? Probably around the same time. Let's see. They give, if you see this, where it says time period, climate status, and description. Pre-Minian, whatever that word is, 290 million years ago. Climate was swampy forests dominated by hardy ferns and mosses, eventually forming coal. Cretaceous, 90 million years ago, temperate rainforest, warm, lush, rainforest, dinosaurs roamed here, no ice cap. Now, as a young child in elementary school, we looked at these things. You can find books, encyclopedias, and all kinds of things that show graphically what this is talking about in table form. Where the dinosaurs were in evolution, when they died, what was the next period, what animals were there, what plants were there, and then the next one is like building up and up and up to where we are now. So Eocene was 50 million years ago. I can't pronounce these scientific words. Cool temperate, still green but cooling, similar to modern day Tasmania. 34 million years ago to present, deep freeze. CO2 levels dropped and ocean currents isolated the continent, causing the ice sheets to form. So, in the early 70s, they were worried about the Earth going into an ice age, which was probably true because they worried about a lot of things. I like seeing a lot of those old commercials. The end of the Earth is coming. And eventually it will for us, not because I'm saying, everybody individually is going to die, but as a species, I would say things don't change. The Earth is going to change so dramatically at some point, maybe in another 90 million years. I don't know. It's inevitable that it'll change to some point that it'll probably wipe humans off the face of the Earth, just like it did with dinosaurs and all these other things. Something's going to catastrophically happen. and we're not going to be anymore. That's why, Musk wants to go to Mars, so he'll have a bird's eye view of the destruction of the human race on Earth. Well, he might not, but you know what I'm saying. Somebody might. Somebody might, pick up the phone one day and go, "Hello, Earth, are you there?" There'll be no answer. All right. Why isn't it green anymore? Back to Robert's addition, contribution in the comments. Two main factors cause the deep freeze. Plate tectonics. Antarctica moved to the South Pole, but more importantly, it broke away from South America. This opened up the Drake Passage, creating a circle of cold ocean current. The Antarctic circumpolar current that swirls around the continent, blocking warm water from reaching it. And then the second thing is CO2 levels. Atmospheric carbon dioxide dropped significantly roughly 34 million years ago, cooling the entire planet and allowing ice sheets to take hold. So it's kind of interesting that it says Antarctica broke away from South America. Just, I'm done. I'm out. Broke away from it. I can't imagine what that would feel like. Not even you. I'm not talking about if you were standing on the break. You know what I mean? I just mean something like that happens. You would think you would feel it at least on this side of the earth. It would almost shake the earth, I think, to its core. Maybe that's stupid. I don't know. But when something that size just cracks away and moves and goes somewhere else, it's got to be rough. I mean, it's got to be rough. But it doesn't specify here why CO2 levels dropped significantly roughly 34 million years ago. And that's not to say that it happened overnight. Like, you get up the next morning and the CO2 levels are, almost zero compared to, 1,000 parts per million. And now it's 480 or 280 parts per million. Robert thinks it's probably an impact from very large object or objects, in his opinion. I don't know. You think that's what did the CO2 in, or you think that's probably or partially what contributed to the tectonic plate shift that then pulled or moved part of South America to the South Pole? So, back to the original premise of the show. According to the map that I was able to find, not one generated by Gemini, but I wouldn't call it a more reliable source, but Wikipedia, boys, Wikipedia. So, if this looks familiar, this image here, I had to, let's go over here. I had to grab this image. I uploaded it into Gemini and said, see this? Do you see this image? This is kind of, what I'm looking, because I was trying to explain it. Show me the ocean, show me the interior seaway going through the United States and outline the states for me, blah, 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 and it gave me junk. It just gave me junk. And then that's when I asked it for a thumbnail that was similar to this, and it put fishes and animals in there and all this other junk. Anyway, so this was the original image that I looked at, and Labrador Seaway, Western, wow, here it is, Labrador Seaway, Western Interior Seaway, and Hudson Seaway. So down here, peoples, why can't you see that? Okay, now, here's Labrador Seaway. I was moving my pointer on it before, I swear I was. In Labrador, Western, Hudson, Tennessee. See us right here? This is little Tennessee right there with this big old finger water sticking up, and that's Western Tennessee right in there. I don't know. Memphis is underwater probably. Maybe Nashville would have been a good place to be living. You know? The funny thing is this doesn't show any encroachment in New York, the eastern seaboards, or, here in California. I wonder why. I don't know. Sea level, let's look, origin and geology. Now this was Wikipedia on the Western Interior Seaway. I don't know if it'll speak to any of the other parts of the United States or anything like that. The Western Interior Seaway was a huge inland sea. It split North America into two halves for the most of the mid and late Cretaceous period. It was up to 2,500 feet deep. Now, Jim and I called it a shallow sea, ocean. 2,500 feet isn't shallow. 600 miles wide and 2,000 miles long. Ooh. Sea level was high in the Cretaceous period. In the middle part of North America sank down. A shallow subducting plate pulled on the bottom of the lithosphere, causing it to move down. I have lots of limestone here in East Tennessee. It was underwater at some point. Yep. And the limestone, if you haven't ever heard of radon gas, and you have a basement in East Tennessee, and you know that it's dug into the limestone and they blew the rocks out and dug a hole, have your house tested for radon gas. It's the breakdown of the limestone. It seeps up from the gases seep up from the rock under, and they get trapped under the concrete slab, and then they find a way through the cracks into your home. It's not good stuff. Alrighty. Blah, 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 causing it to move down. The sea entered both north and south and came and went during the course of the Cretaceous. Widespread carbonate deposits suggesting that the seaway was warm and tropical with abundance of algae. The shrunken regressive phase of the Western Interior Seaway is sometimes called the Prairie Seaway. The long, narrow western border of the seaway, called Laramidia, had one of the most diverse collections of dinosaurs anywhere on Earth. The Western Interior Seaway was a shallow sea filled with abundant marine life, and this included predatory marine reptiles. Other marine life included sharks, giant shellfish eating something. There were advanced bony fish, such as the massive 5-meter long something, a fish larger than any modern bony fish. Other sea life included invertebrates such as mollusks, anemones, squid-like, anemones, molluscus, belemnites, okay, and plankton, including those other things that secreted the chalky platelets that give the crustacean its name. The Western Interior Seaway was Robert, you didn't tell me that this junk wasn't on the screen anymore. Sorry about that, people. Robert's failing me. Anyway. Where are we? Over here we are. Where down here? The western interior seaway was home to early birds also, including the flightless Hesperonychus. You can't see that. So, this is something that was found in South Dakota. I don't know what it's trying to show me here because I can't pronounce that word. Let's see what it says. It's a rock from South Dakota that supposedly proves, I guess, that South Dakota was underwater. All right, so there is the image that I was looking at to say, oh, well, look, Tennessee used to be, Western Tennessee used to be oceanfront property. And I call it an ocean because I don't particularly know the difference between a sea and an ocean. I believe that a sea is, I won't say landlocked because that makes it, you know, like a lake. But it's not an ocean anymore. Robert, what's the difference between an ocean and a sea? Any idea what the difference is between an ocean and a sea? Let's just look that up real quick. And we're not going to ask Gemini. No sirree, we're not going to do it. And I cannot type without looking at the keyboard. Just get over it. Could I? Eventually, maybe. All right. Let's look at this. Primary difference between an ocean and a sea include the size, the depth, location, and ecological significance. Oceans are vast bodies of seawater that cover over 71% of the Earth's surface. There are 5 major oceans. Gotcha. Seas, on the other hand, are smaller bodies of salt water that are often partially enclosed by land. For example, the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea are both considered seas and are significantly smaller oceans. So there you have it. Depths. Oceans are generally much deeper than seas with an average depth of 3688 meters or 12,000 feet. The Marina, the trench in the Pacific Ocean is the deepest point on Earth. Seas tend to be shallower, making them more accessible and often more influenced by human activities. Oceans are not confined by land or continuous expanses of water that surround continents. Seas are typically located where the land meets the ocean and are often partially enclosed by land. So there you go. So back to our picture, I would definitely say it fits the bill of a sea, if you go by that definition. So, I'm not a scientist. I never played one on TV. But apparently it is true. And as I was going through this show, especially looking at the different talking about the crustacean period, all these other things, I started getting these flashbacks in my mind to being a kid thinking, man, dinosaurs were cool, and looking at that circle or that buildup of this is where the dinosaurs were, and this is where they got this, and this is when it changed to mammals, and this is where we are, and all those things underneath there and the different periods of time over millions of years. I got a lot of that sense back in my brain because it was talking about those things. And I guess at that point in time, I realized or knew or was told, because if I knew it, I would still remember it. That's the difference between remembering something and learning something. I would still know the fact, and it wouldn't be a total surprise, is the fact there was no ice on Earth like there are now. No polar caps, no ocean ice, no sea ice, none of that stuff floating around. Everything was warm enough to keep the ice from freezing, which would be kind of wild, really, if you think about it. Winters, even north, would be, what did it say? In Alaska, it was like 52 degrees. I mean, it don't stay 52 degrees here, So that'd be wild, really wild, to be living in that period of time. Now, the United States was much, much smaller because there was a lot more water covering these areas. So, if you were actually, it's fun to kind of do a little thought exercise, as they like to call it, on what if it was like that. It had never changed, the poles had never frozen, and things had developed like they are now, and I was doing this show, and I could drive 5 hours and be at the Western Interior Seaway. Or I could drive 5 hours the other way and be in, the Atlantic Ocean. That would be that would be crazy. And it wouldn't be the United States, probably, because there would be a sea in between the eastern side and the western side. It might be a totally different country over there. Totally different. They would all stay over, those westerners would stay over there, and us easterners would stay over here. And it wouldn't even be like it any thought that we were the same country at all. Because we wouldn't be connected. According to that picture right there, there's no connection between the West Coast and the East Coast. So it would just be, no, we're not even part of those people over there. Robert says he'd be, let's see. He likes the Gray fossil site. That's in Gray, Tennessee. And they dig up fossils there, just like excavating real honest to gosh fossils. I've never been there. Everybody that's been there says, man, that's unbelievable. It's really cool. And Robert thinks around here it would be like a jungle. It might be, but it might be too hot. I don't know. Who knows? But it's very interesting to do that thought process about, like, what would it be now? And think of all, let's just say, would our population be, the world population be kind of the same? There's not as much land mass because everything's covered in water. Not everything. There wouldn't be any people if everything was covered in water. Well, have you ever seen that movie with, I can see his face, Waterworld? Help me out, Robert. What was the guy that played in Waterworld? The guy that built them and they would come. Baseball movie. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, water takes over the world and everything's, and then he has gills. I hope I didn't spoil it for you. Kevin Costner, you are correct, sir. Give yourself an apple. Uh, Waterworld. He has lungs and webbed fingers and toes. And land is not to be had, but he can dive down and dig up dirt. He dives down and is it New York City that he dives down to, or it has to be New York City. I think the Statue of Liberty or something's underwater like the Monkey movie, Planet of the Apes. But yeah, everybody lives on ships and dirt. Dirt can't be had, but he can go down and get dirt because he can dive to the bottom of the oceans and dig it and put it in a jar and bring it up. All right. That would be interesting. The population couldn't be the same because there's not enough land mass. Well, we don't live in every corner of the world now. If there was more water, less land, I don't think the population could grow that fast. There's not enough food, right? There wouldn't be enough supplies to handle a large population like you could now, or like you can now. Farms would be null and void because it'd all be tropical rainforest. We'd all be eating bananas and figs and those kind of things. But in the thought game, the way we are now, we could clear a rainforest and make it farmland if we wanted to. Then we'd be screwing up the ecosystem just like we are now, I guess. Right? So, I don't know. Very interesting thought. Maybe somebody should make a movie of that. Not the end of the world, but what if the world never changed? See, another movie that it's coming into my mind is when the perfect storm hits and it turns the United States into ice. There again, Statue of Liberty shown, I think, with its arms sticking up above the snow cap. And it just blows in and freezes the oceans. It freezes everything. It dumps 50 miles of snow on the earth. It's, a crazy, crazy thing. And people are, this one, group of people it shows are living in a library and burning books to stay warm, and the snow's covering the top, and the dude comes to rescue them, and he walks off the snowpack, steps on the roof of the library. It's that deep. Robert probably knows that one too. Day after tomorrow. Yes, day after tomorrow. But somebody ought to make a movie so it's not like we're living now and all of a sudden this catastrophe happens and the polar ice caps melt and kill millions and millions of people. It's just the fact that it never froze. Let's just say CO2 levels stayed at 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million, and we just grew, we just developed, or whatever you want to believe, to where we are now in those circumstances, not in the current circumstances. What it would be like. Everybody would be living in a rainforest or some type of jungle or moderate climate. You'd have maybe a few pair of long pants, maybe a hoodie or something like that, a rain jacket, really good rain jackets. It'd be crazy. Robert wants to know, what if the major volcanoes erupted at the same time? All right. That's like everybody firing their guns all at once and shooting the planet off into space. That would make a good song lyric. But I think if all the volcanoes erupted at once, and they all spewed tons of lava. And what is lava? It's basically the core of the earth. Molten rock that sits at the the center of the earth. It's the core, and all this cooled lava is around it. And that builds out to cooler dirt or rock, and then the dirt, and then you get the outside part of the earth. But the inside is a molten iron core. And that stuff leaks out, right? That's the whole thing about a volcano. It finds its way up. There's pressure. It finds its way up, forms a pimple on the top of the earth, and then erupts everywhere. So if they all erupted at once, there would be, I think, a massive release of the iron core of the earth. It would get off balance. It would wobble. It would elongate and then just fly apart. There you go. That's what I think. What do you think? That's what would happen. And we wouldn't really have time to do anything. Could you imagine? What would cool or heat up? The earth would blow up. It wouldn't be, hot or cold. I think if they all erupted. Now, depending on, here we go. Was it a short eruption? Was it a total eruption? Did it spew lava out for 5 days? I don't know. But if it were all the major ones, and I don't know how many there are, is there 7? Is there 2? I don't know. But if there was enough that expelled enough of the molten core of the earth, it couldn't help but get off center, right? Because it's massive. Well, now that I said the word massive, maybe it wouldn't even be a drop in the bucket of the core of Earth to have all of them spewing out magma. I don't know. You'd have to have a lot of numbers to crunch and figure out the physics of it all. But I still think with my hypothesis, if you got enough of the core out and put it, because see what's going to happen, think about this. It's in the center. And if you know, ash clouds, if you know the centrifugal force, things in the middle don't have a lot of, outward force. But buddy, when it gets to the outside of the earth, so all this hot magma comes out, it's trapped by gravity, but when it hits the surface, it hardens. So now you're adding a bunch of weight to the very perimeter of the earth. Maybe side by side, maybe top and bottom. I don't know where all these volcanoes are. But you take something that doesn't have a lot of centrifugal in the middle, move some of it to the outside, which then weights the earth, in one spot more than another. You're going to get that. I bet you it'd just fly apart. Would it do it in a day? I don't know. Probably not. Would probably suffer terribly while it was, rotating on its axis, slinging itself, flying apart. Yeah, nice things to think about. Nice things to think about. All right. So we've rambled on now about 53 minutes on this oceanfront property in western Tennessee that, hey, you know what? Maybe it'll come back one day. You never know. Hang out another 90 million years and see what it looks like. Maybe Robert's right. Volcanoes will erupt and there'll be 4 new continents maybe, or at least an island. Okay? So, who knows? But I don't think I want to be around to see all this kind of cool stuff happen. I would just want to go and go to work and come back, have my show on Thursdays and fix a few cars. You know what I mean? Make a few videos and then pass away in my sleep, go to heaven. That's my plan. I don't know. Hopefully it'll work out. But Until then, tune in Thursday nights, 9 o'clock. Minutes with Milo is live. You can call the number. Robert could have called in and said, hey, what would happen if all the volcanoes erupted? I don't know. Leave me a message or a comment. I don't know. I don't know if you could email. Maybe I ought to get another banner. In this other program I was using for this, I could put up banners. Race banners. Race Banyan. Johnny Quest. All that stuff. Leave me a comment. Subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends, your folks, your relatives, your cavemen. I don't know. Anybody's got the internet might find the show interesting. Let them know. And I did go check out my Robert. Have you seen my latest video? I'm gonna put you on the spot. Have you seen my latest video of what did I call it? It was about pudding shots, but it's called Viking pudding. You just have to look at the thumbnail while I call it Viking pudding. And it's I won't say a cooking video. It's a mixing and matching and freezing video. I think you'll like it. I think you'll find it interesting. You ought to try it, make some. No, painting my alternator was a what they call a reel, R-E-E-L. That was just a bunch of pictures I took, and then it strings them together with music. Oh, so you saw the one where I made pudding shots? Yep, you saw it? Cool. What'd you think? You think you're going to try to make some? Think they'd be good? I'm telling you that stuff's good. You think you're going to try to make some? Or is that, too much cooking? Too much hard work involved? Which is it? Looks interesting? Come on, man. It tastes great. Looks interesting, tastes great. Tastes so good that you'd get sick if you eat too much of it. Where was I? Oh, yeah. I was getting ready to say goodnight to everybody. And check out my other videos and watch some new ones. I got stuff I need to put together and put up there about automotives and different things like that. Cars I've been working on, some other things. And maybe do another kitchen video. Call them kitchen videos. All right. Here's a challenge. If you want to, make yourself a video on your phone of making and eating pig brains and scrambled eggs. Send it to me. Put it up on the channel, and we'll review it. We'll make fun of it. I say review. Make fun of, review. Same thing. Anyway, make one. And if you don't want to start a channel, I'll put it up on this channel and see what happens. You may get 1 million views of you making and eating pig brains and scrambled eggs. It would probably get more views if you videotape harvesting said items and then making it and then eating it. Or you could just eat a leech. You could just do that. I think I talked about that before. What happens if you swallowed one whole? Would it attach to your stomach and suck your blood from inside and swell up? Kill you? Buddy, I don't know. All right. Enough of the fun and games. Thursdays 9. Watch for other videos. Hasta la vista. Whatever they say, that means good night. Till next time. And don't say goodbye. Just say,